All right, we're back here on the Talk North Podcast Network. This is Wood Sticks. I'm your host, Kevin Gorg. We are, as always, recording from the Aquarius Home Services studio. And when we last visited, it was on a week ago, almost to the day, and the Wild were still playing, and the Kentucky Derby was yet to happen. The good news is we picked the winner in the Kentucky Derby. I hope you were able to tail us and cash some bets and enjoy that race on Saturday. The bad news is, and we talked about it last week on the show, the season has come to an end. So briefly here before we get to our guest today, and our guest is a good one, and I want to spend enough time and leave enough time for Bill Lechner, one of my dear friends in high school hockey, a legendary coach at Hill Murray. But let's talk briefly about the Wild season and reflect on what that was and maybe take a sneak peek at where this thing is going to go. I had a chance to head over to the Xcel Energy Center and see some of the guys before they left town. Connected with Zeev Boyum as he was getting ready to go to Amsterdam. Talked to Liam Ogren for a while as he was getting ready to train this summer in Sweden and leaving here this week. And those are two key players that I think will be a part of the future roster moving forward. But hell of a hockey season. Our job covering the games on FanDuel Sports Network is to hopefully bring you a good product, an entertaining product. I think it was all of that. I go back to the start where they had that first month of the schedule basically on the road. I think they had 2 home games in their first 5 weeks. And so there was a real emphasis during training camp on making sure the team hit the ground running. And it was a hard training camp that John Hines and his staff put out there, and it worked. The Wild got off to a terrific start. They were unbelievable on the road, and they headed into December as one of the top teams in the league with a record of 18-4-4. When I look back at this season, no question, one of the defining factors with this year's edition of the Minnesota Wild is the fact that they had to deal with some unbelievable injuries. The number of injuries and the number of key guys they lost was something like I had never seen. The year before they had injuries, but not like this. Kirill Kaprizov missing basically half the year. Joel Eriksson basically half the year. And then the rotation of top defensemen that missed double-digit games from Middleton to Brodin to Spurgeon to Faber, an area they probably could have ill-afforded to miss those defensemen, really put this team in a place of challenge. And they had to work like hell just to make the playoffs. And I remember vividly the last week of the regular season, the pressure that was on this team when they were down 2-0 after 40 minutes in Vancouver and had to rally to win. Faber scores the goal that kind of turns the game back momentum-wise in their direction. Then Foligno scores. They dominate the third period, eventually winning in overtime. And then the win on the final game of the regular season schedule with Joel Eriksson scoring 6-on-5 goal in the final 21 seconds of the year. That basically was the 2 points they needed to get in. So you match up with Las Vegas. You're a road team. Vegas is a huge favorite. And Minnesota, I thought, had a great series. I look back at those 6 games, and in every one of those 6 games for Minnesota, there was a path to victory. The losses were all 1-goal losses. I know there was an open net goal in game 1 that happened at the buzzer. And I look at Vegas as one of the best 2 or 3, maybe 4 teams in the NHL. So this team is close. And now, the shackles come off. We've talked about it for years now, but the Suter and Parise money is freed up. The contract negotiation has started with Kirill Kaprizov. As I have said on this show all year long, I am not one bit worried. I think here in July this summer, we'll have Kaprizov locked up. My best guess is it's an 8-year deal. It's around $120 million. And we move forward with one of the best players in the league. And the Brock Faber money kicks in. So now you have to hope. Again, if every team that takes a big step forward, and for Minnesota, the next step is to win a playoff round and to make a cup run. And that's going to be tied to young players who are still in the cheap part of their contract, making an impact. And I just mentioned Zeev Boyum. I mentioned Liam Ogren for a reason. These are 2 players I believe next year they're going to be a fixture on this roster. Zeev Boyum is going to be a go-to defenseman for Minnesota for years to come. And I know he looked green, and I know he looked nervous, and I know it wasn't perfect in the games he played. But can you imagine going from college hockey as a 19-year-old and stepping into that type of situation? I give the kid a ton of credit. I was lucky enough to talk to him a couple of times, both on the microphone and off the microphone. And this kid's got the it factor, man. This kid knows he's good. This kid knows he's going to be good, and he's going to get better, and he's going to be a factor. And I love everything about his personality. This kid's a winner. So I'm really excited to see how his offseason goes. He's having a chance to play in the World Championships right now, which is great. I think he's going to hit the ground running next year in training camp and never look back. Liam Ogren, it's a big year. And I talked to him about his training regimen overseas in Sweden. He is really motivated to be a top 6 guy next year. He doesn't want to just make the team, doesn't want to be a fringe guy going back and forth. He wants to be a top 6 player on this team. And if you look at him physically, he's got the skill set to do that. So those are the 2 most important guys right now in the system that can make the biggest impact for Minnesota without having to do anything else. And if you listen to Bill Guerin's press conference this week, and maybe watched it back on social media, he didn't beat around the bush. He likes the blue line he's got. With Jiricek and Boyum being added to that blue line, there's going to be some depth there. He likes the wings he's got for the most part. He mentioned the center position. And so whether it's a trade with Marco Rossi, which if you're reading the tea leaves, just watching the way this thing played out, and anyone who knows Marco Rossi and has been around him, you love the kid. He works hard. He's got a ton of skill. But he's a smaller player on a roster that's trying to get bigger and stronger. I don't know what type of fit that's going to be. If he's there, he'll be great. I don't worry about Marco Rossi. He's a very versatile guy that can move up and down the lineup, and I thought he played great in a limited role on that 4th line. He was still in the power play, so it wasn't, again, people made a big deal out of that, and I know Marco was disappointed, and I understand that, but I think it got a little bit blown out of proportion. He was still on the power play and has that type of skill set. The bottom line is, Bill Guerin's likely going to be out there looking to bring in a top 6 center. It means a guy that can take pressure off Drew Eriksson-Ek. Everybody's talking about Sam Bennett. I love Sam Bennett. It might be pie in the sky. I don't know. Guy's making $4 or $5 million right now. That's likely going to be closer to 10 or 11, and he's worth probably every nickel of it. He's tough. He's hard-nosed. He's got great hands. He wins draws. Play power play. You can put him on a penalty kill. He's won a Stanley Cup. Like, there's nothing this guy doesn't have in his tool shed that's going to be helpful to what this team needs. And to have Eck as your second-line center and Sam Bennett at the top of that list, it might be pie in the sky. It might be a dream, but that's, I think, for a lot of Wild fans, the scenario they're hoping plays out. But let's let it play out. Bill Guerin has done a great job at manufacturing talent via the trade. And I look at the deal he made with the Kings when everybody knew they could not afford Kevin Fiala, bringing in both Brock Faber and a first-round draft pick that ends up being Liam Ogren. Unbelievable deal. The Marc-Andre Fleury deal didn't seem like a big deal at the time. He's at the end of his career, but the ripple effects that this guy has had, the production that he has brought to the table, Marc-Andre Fleury has been one of the great finds at the trade deadline. So give Bill Guerin a chance to make some of those moves. They finally have the money to make it count, and they've got a roster where the core of the team is really good. Like, you look at this roster right now, this is a damn good hockey team. And so I'm excited. And the offsides play with Nyquist, a bummer. I know Gus feels bad, and I know Wild fans cringe when I bring it up. That play probably flipped the series. If you want me to be as honest as I can be here, just a bummer of a deal. It happens. It happens in the blink of an eye, and it's unfortunate that the Wild could have won that game, probably should have won that game. But you move forward, and you give Ryan Hartman maybe some credit here, because not only did he come back and play the best game of the series by any Wild player in Game 6. He was the best player on the ice in Game 6 in St. Paul, but he had an unbelievable playoff run this year. He had a great series where, if this is the Ryan Hartman we're going to get, the team is going to be that much better. Because if you go get a guy like Sam Bennett and you have Drew Eriksson-Ek and you have Ryan Hartman on that 3rd or 4th line with those matchups, with his skill set, he might get back to that form we saw a couple years ago where he scored 30-plus goals. So another one of those, silver lining moments for me, where I look at that series and say, okay, we've got some real potential here to do some great things. So keep the faith, Wild fans. They'll be back, and I think better than ever next year. And I can't wait to see what Bill Guerin and his staff does to put that team together. Up next, though, we segue into some high school hockey. If you've watched any high school hockey in the last decade or two, you know who Bill Lechner is. Legendary coach at Hill Murray, multiple state championships. He's coached some of the best players in the world, including a guy like Jake Gensel. Down in Florida right now, taking a few weeks off after the hockey season to recharge the battery, and we will connect with Coach Lechner next here on Wooden Sticks. But first, let's talk about some of the great partners we have with the show. First of all, I want to thank my friend John Schweitz, a fellow Hill Murray pioneer, by the way, and Minnesota Masonic Charities for their great partnership with this program. When people think of the Freemasons, they often think of secret handshakes and unusual hats, and of course, the pancake breakfast. Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you think about the work that they do right here in our community. Places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota or the Masonic Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home in Bloomington. They are just a few examples of the important work that the Freemasons support here in Minnesota. As part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, Masons have consistently answered the call when it comes to charitable needs. I am happy that Minnesota Masonic Charities has chosen Minnesota Bound and this podcast as a place to help spread the word. We look forward to learning so much more about their many programs here in the weeks to come. I also want to take the time to thank OnX Maps for all their great support.
The weather is warming up. That means it's time to put your augers away and it's time to grab the boat. Let OnX Fish help you find the next best bite. The Fish app offers the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your success. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. Download OnX Fish on the App Store or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information about the app that is changing the game.
And of course, our friends at Lexus of Maplewood and Wayzata, fabulous vehicles, fabulous people that sell them. All right, we're back with Bill Lechner here next on Wooden Sticks. Welcome back to Wooden Sticks. We are recording again today from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We are flying down to beautiful Florida and connecting with our my dear friend Bill Lechner. Billy, great to have a chat today with you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's nice being with you guys.
Well, I got to start here. I know we're in the middle of the NHL playoffs, and it's for me, it's sad because the wild season is over. But I still love watching hockey every night, even though you're down in Florida. How much NHL hockey have you watched?
What's crazy is down here we can watch it all.
That's great.
So I started with a couple weeks ago. Remember, it was Ryan McDonough's 1,000th game for Tampa Bay.
Yep.
So my assistant, Pat Schaffhauser, and his wife, because Pat lives in Tampa now. And so we came down here and we're in Naples. And so my wife and I and his wife and he went to the game and we're with Jake Genzel and Ryan after the game and stuff. So that was started there. But then we were, to answer your question, I can flip channels. My wife just shakes her head because it's on ESPN and on ABC and all the games are on. So I've been watching them all. Quite a bit.
It's been fantastic too. Like I think the playoffs are tried and true. They always deliver, right, Coach? Like they always give you incredible intensity, incredible. I think happenings, including over the weekend, we saw these game sevens where it looked like one team had the game wrapped up. The old 2-goal rule in hockey. Right. And both games flipped upside down. I love the playoff intensity.
Yeah, it was just crazy. And we even tell our high school kids, as it gets near the end and you have the top games and playoffs, it's going to come down to a moment. So you try and prepare during the season for that moment. But, you feel terrible for these professional teams. I mean, they're all so good, they're all so even, and the last game with 3 seconds left, they score and go to overtime. And it's crazy hockey, but it's fun to watch.
Do you find yourself, because you can probably never take that coaching hat off, whether there's a TV timeout or in that game there was an actual timeout called, do you find yourself thinking like, okay, if this was Hill Murray and White Bear and we were down to, and it was 6-on-5, do you kind of have your mind in that forum where you're kind of taking yourself to that bench thinking what you might do?
You definitely do. I definitely just kind of, and, you stare at them and you try and learn from them. I mean, we're just high school level. So you stare at the professional athletes and their systems and the coaches and when they're calling timeouts and how they're, what they're doing on face-off plays in those moments. And it's a little side note, but, when my wife Sue, it's like because we go to Wild games and we're number one Wild fans and watch you guys and support. And she goes, I don't know if I want to go with you because, you're just sitting there coaching or you're sitting there just watching, with notebook. Can't we just get like a ice cream cone and watch the game? So you get the drill. But yeah, it's crazy how, and I really truly like to watch what they do in certain times, what they're doing on forechecks. We're learning all the time too, and try and bring it to the high school atmosphere.
I'm glad you brought up Ryan McDonough because I wanted to ask you. You've been around Minnesota high school hockey for over 4 decades. Do you still feel like we're producing NHL talent on a regular basis? Because I get excited when I'm working a Wild game and you've got a Ryan McDonough or a Jake Gensel in town, and now you're seeing the next wave. Jackson Blake is playing and doing great things in this league. So yeah. In your eyes, has the high school hockey continued to pump out the right amount of talent?
I very much do. Obviously, we're prejudiced, and Kev, how the world is changing. I mean, literally the last 3 days, and I'll keep it generic. The last 3 days, I've had 4 or 5 calls from junior teams, that they're in their draft now for the USHL and all that stuff, and like, well, I want you to know, we're asking about this kid and that kid, and it's a little challenging, and I know it's going around it, and I'll be very polite, but it's like these kids are sophomores and juniors for futures draft and for now and for seniors, and it's like, it's I think we're producing. And I still think we can do it. I'm naive, and it's not trying to be prejudiced or selfish, but I still think we can do it by having these kids, stay in their high school programs and develop and be on the first line in the power play as seniors versus, sitting in some other city or state, putting on a suit and tie once in a while and practicing and living in a basement without their families. And I don't want to go too deep on that, but it's a little challenging. But I also see these guys like Ryan and Letty and all those guys. I mean, there's a lot of, Anders Lee. I remember coaching baseball, and Anders Lee sitting there, he's playing baseball with us in the spring, and we're screwing around after the state tournament that we were just with him a couple of weeks ago over at his field, and the memories of that. And I'm going on a soapbox, but it's like all these guys can be very successful and just stay in our high school programs and do all that, but to each his own. Everybody's got their own story or their own bobber.
Well, and I think it's important when I have a chance to talk to kids, I get that question a lot. And, I've been lucky enough to do this thing now, covering the Wild for almost 20 years. And I've seen all kinds of different players come and go. I go back to this, like you get one chance to be a high school hockey player and you're lucky enough to play in Minnesota. And you and I both know the magic that state tournament provides. I've played junior hockey. And even though I didn't play D1, I played college hockey, and I loved it all. Yeah. But I would never have traded any of that in. And I think if you're good enough, and we've seen like the Nick Bukestad, if you're good enough, you're going to get there anyway. So Correct. Why would you allow yourself to miss out on that opportunity? I just think, Bill, it's too special.
Yeah. I think you're so right. I mean, just the whole package of, and I know I'm old-fashioned, and I'm the old guy of these coaching group now, but it's just, you get to be at home, you get to be with your buddies. I talked to, a couple of our guys right after the season, because you can go online, a couple of our seniors that were good and they'll play Division I, blah, blah, blah. They were off into Canada and off down into, the junior teams. And when I talk to them, we keep close, and I talk to them probably a handful of times while I've been down here, after our season. And they're like, Coach, yeah, this is great, but, I miss school. I miss being around you guys. I love high school hockey. I love Tilmur, all those things. And you almost feel it's like, well, that's why don't rush to that. I mean, yeah, it's part of the deal. It's part of the world that they're going to have to do. And you kind of warn them it's going to turn into a business, as you know, Kev, you've lived it. And, but it's that fine line. And I don't know if, who's drinking the Kool-Aid or the parents feel the pressure or, and yeah, it's kind of crazy, but you don't know it till you live it. But I wish they could just, play high school and then go from there. And you said it perfectly. The cream of the crop's going to get there anyway. They'll find For you. Sure. So yeah. But I don't know if the world is moving.
It is, and it's a different world now, and I respect that. I still think, having worked the tournament this year, that I was again reminded of just what an unbelievable weekend that is, and how lucky these kids are to have that right in their backyard playing Minnesota hockey. So let's talk about the talent you've coached. I got to ask you where Jake Gensel stacks up, because I can imagine in the time you've spent behind that bench at Hill Murray. You've seen all kinds of different terrific hockey players. Where does Jake stack up?
It's easy to say because of what he's accomplished at the professional level. But, Ryan and Gabe, his older brothers, and then Mike obviously coached at the U. So I was connected to those guys when Jake was a little boy. Probably met Jake when he was about 4th, 5th grade. And then he was asked if he could come to our summer camps when Ryan and Gabe were coming through. And so he was like, a 7th, 8th grader. And and when he's out on that ice, I call it the it factor. And I think I've heard you allude to it. He just as a very young boy, he was a skinny little kid, I think it was 7th grade summer. And we put him out there, and then you'd scrimmage on Fridays to have some fun. And he was hitting guys. He's like a step ahead almost of anticipation. How you make one play and be thinking about the next one and all that. We do it in the baseball world all the time. Make one play, think the next play, think the next play. First job, second job, third job. We try and teach that in hockey. And he had that. He had it at a really young age. So to answer your question, I hate to put categorical because I'm going to get, calls after this saying, what about me, coach? What about me? But I would say definitely top 5% of just that it factor, that, that quality of great hands, great instincts. He's not Ryan McDonough's size or some of those big boys that play for, Vegas or wherever, but he can play at that game and he can, he stays away from trouble, but he's not soft because he's a complete package. I know when he first was playing on Pittsburgh and having the success there in the Stanley Cup run there, the reporters from Pittsburgh would call me and go, "Did you ever think?" And it's like, if he could handle the strength of it, or if he could handle the toughness of it, yes, I believed he would. So to answer your question, probably at least top 5%, if not greater, just by the whole package.
Well, and I marvel, Bill, because I see him off the ice and he still looks like a little boy. Like, I think of Jared Spurgeon, and I know it's a different position, and they're on different teams, but I look at Jared Spurgeon off the ice, and then I see what he can do on the ice, and he's out there at 165 pounds soaking wet defending. The average forward in the NHL is probably 6'2", over 200 pounds, and Spurgeon is one of the elite defensemen in this league. And then I look at Jake Ensel, and where does he score his goals? He scores all of his goals, it feels like, in that dirty area around the net, and he literally, like Jared Spurgeon, probably weighs 165 pounds, soaking wet, and he's so smart without the puck. I really do marvel at the consistency at which he's scored at the NHL level. And it's funny you brought up the Penguins, because those same Pittsburgh reporters years ago told all of us, and I'm sure you've heard the story, that when he first got a look at the NHL level, Sidney Crosby went to the coaching staff and said, "I want that guy on my line." Now that tells you all you need to know.
Correct. Yeah, and he's unselfish. He's smart. And you said it perfectly, Gorgie. I watch him close, especially on special teams and stuff. He's right in front of the goalie. He's already down in the dirty areas and handling it, but he doesn't seem to get pounded on. He kind of just slides and drifts and moves away and comes back. And people go, "Well, does that mean he's soft?" And it's like, absolutely not. It means he's smart. He's going to an open area or whatever to get open so he can give the puck back to Crosby or whoever. So he's done that since he was a little boy. It's fun to watch. So it was fun having him. Those years fly by quickly when the good ones, come through, though. You wish they could stay about 10 years, but that doesn't work.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, I know it's always more fun when you're in the tournament. And I know I talked to you midway through the season, and you knew that you were in a very tough section. You had a great club, but it wasn't going to be easy. So now reflecting back on just the state tournament, we'll get to the Pioneers, but the tournament to me, and I guess I had a different perspective this year because I had the opportunity to get back and work it. But I thought the tournament really delivered this year at both the Class A and Double A level, and I think a part of that was the crazy championship game we saw on the Double A side.
Right. Yeah, the first instinct, and I'm being way open, obviously, on a microphone, but, I won't say I'm a poor loser, but we took it very hard this year, and we won't have to talk about Hill Murray, but, at the end, they had us rated as a top team. We had the best record in the state, beat all the top teams, all the teams in the state tournament. So, but you know how that goes, so it was like I wasn't going to watch, but then it was like, I got to watch. I gotta see this. I gotta to Kevin too. So, but just the whole package of watching the games and seeing the outcomes and the battles. Yeah, they were really good games and very tight competitions, and no one's really maybe closely paying attention, but the last six games of our season were against all those teams in top, and we knocked them all off, and not being arrogant, but we knew going into the end of the season. I mean, literally from Rogers to St. Thomas to Stillwater to Edina to Moorhead. That was our last six games, and so we just kept knocking them all off, feeling we're ready. But then on the other hand, you're thinking, those are all state tournament teams, and stuff happens, and overtimes or hitting pipes or exactly what's going on in the NHL right now,
right?
And you're putting your stuff away. But yeah, it was a very impressive state tournament, and yes, we're spoiled. We've been there a lot of times. So some people say, "Shut up and deal with it. It's somebody else's turn." But you know how that is when you're competitive.
Hard to do that. And I had some longtime high school hockey fans, buddies of mine, that were lucky enough to be at Aldrich Arena for that closing game of the regular season when you guys played Moorhead. And I think it's kind of ironic that the championship game had that 1980s feel to it, where maybe the team that scores last wins 7-6,
right.
8-7 type of game, because my buddies don't throw around compliments easily. And they walked out of that arena saying, as far as regular season goes, the best high school hockey game they'd ever seen. And that was the game where you guys rallied from far back. I think it was an 8-7 game against the Spuds. And that speaks to what you're saying, though, Bill. It speaks to, it does come down to one game on a section final. Maybe if you play a 3 or 5 game series, you're able to beat Stillwater. But the bottom line is you guys were as good as anybody in the state. Well,
thank you. But, talk is cheap. But yeah, I'm being very, very honest, because some years it's like we're very fortunate to be here and we've done well, and you rise at the right time. But we knew we had a special team this year, great group of guys, great leadership. And it's, no bull. It's just we had an exceptional year as far as good kids, never complaining. And I'll go on a Bible. Parents left us alone, very supportive. We had no issues this year, and that doesn't help in high school hockey. I mean, in the world we're in with parents, families, kids, everybody accepted their role. So it was really special. So it hit hard. But it was in that Moorhead game you're talking about. That was crazy. We got up a couple, and then we gave up 4 in the second, and we're after the second period, we're going, they're really good. The coaching staff. So it's like, what are we going to do? I go, well, we'll create a plan. So we're down. What was it, 7-4? And so literally went around, and I'll go general. So I hope I'm not boring anybody. But so it's like, okay, we go to our goalie. I go, you're the best, one of the best goalies in the state. They say you and Moorhead's goalie are the best. I go, you know what? So that means no more goals. Okay, just stop the puck. You'll be fine. Can you do that? Yeah, got it, coach. Okay, go to the defense. It's like, and both teams, if you remember, like this is game 25, and I think they had given up like 33 goals all year, and we had given up like 29 or something. I mean, it was crazy. Both that we were top 2 that way, and so it's like, okay, defensively, we shut this down. You got okay, coach, got it. I go, okay, so the first 5 minutes we get a goal, the next 5 minutes we get a goal, the next 5 minutes we get a goal, and we win in overtime. Can you do that? And we got 2 minutes to spare if we had to pull a goalie. You guys got that? and you're kind of making it up like, can this really happen? But you got to try something, because if you look at the mountain, you got to take a step at a time. So not being arrogant, but it worked and it was fun. And yeah, we're shaking our head with, at the end of the game with the coaching staff, we're both shaking our heads on both teams, like what just happened. But
well, and that's what I really appreciate about your background, and I followed your team for many years. I love the schedule you play. I think if kids realize when they play at Hill Murray, they're going to play great competition, and you choose to play those non-conference games against the very best in the state, and teams want to play you. Like teams are like, okay, if Hill Murray calls, I want to play this team, because that's how you get ready for section playoffs and a run at the state tournament.
Well, you're very kind, and yes, we've been very blessed to, hopefully try and do it the right way, so people, and we know that everybody doesn't love us, but they hopefully respect us. That so we do have, and it's very nice. We do have that choice to, we kind of can pick our schedule, and basically, and a lot of good communication, and acquaintances with a lot of the coaches at the top end. And you kind of watch from year to year of who's going to be there, and so. We were fortunate this year to pick up teams like Rogers and them that are kind of up and comings, and scrimmage Shakopees and, all that kind of stuff. So along with the regulars, playing Edina twice, and the Wayzatas and Minnetonkas and all them. So yeah, it's a good schedule. And part of it is in the world we're in now, we have to do that to compete and want kids to want to and families to stay at Hill Murray for a student education, because
Yep.
otherwise they're looking for what's better. And so we're trying to keep it a good high school environment with a high quality.
Our paths first crossed way back in the mid-'80s at the state tournament. You were a very young assistant coach for Terry Skrypek with Hill Murray when I played at Burnsville. What was the impact, and maybe what is still the impact that Coach Skrypek has had on your career as a coach?
That's a great question. And Skry and I became pretty close, as time went on, and probably even more so now than in the past as far as just talking and reminiscing. But yes, I was just a green young kid, just out of just the same school you did, Cretan High School and St. Thomas College. And, you're kind of a young whippersnapper that goes, well, I'm a good athlete, so I know everything about coaching. Far from it. Way far from it. So anyway, Coach Skry was just a blessing. And those guys, they hired me as a young assistant, both in baseball and hockey. And it was fun to learn from Skry. Skry was very level-headed. I know you know him well. He, good X's and O's guy, good temperament. You knew he had a passion for the kids and a passion for hockey and the program. And he was a really good Christian person, not to go too deep there, but it just, he helped us mature and grow up quicker than I was then, if that makes sense. He was just a calm in the storm, and learned a lot from him. And what was really nice is I could see the more that he saw that I was developing or growing, then he gave me more responsibility, which is really cool. Start off, it's like, yeah, young man, you got to earn your stripes. And I think that was perfect for us to go through that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Christian thing, because I played for him at St. Thomas, and, being a Catholic institution, he brought in, we did the Hail Mary before we hit the ice. Like, we gathered up, and he, to me, Bill, was one of those guys that the intensity he brought, the passion he brought for hockey, he never sacrificed who he was as a human being or that faith side of things just to win a hockey game. So he was always doing the right thing first. And I think that and it's funny, at the time, I was, again, a college kid who thought I knew everything. But then you look back on your time playing for the guy and you're like, I'm a better guy off the ice because I played for Skry. And I didn't realize it as much at the time. But now that I'm a dad, now that I'm a grandpa, I look back at that time and I'm like, oh, now I get it. Like, it took me a while to figure it out. But he was able to walk that line like nobody I've played for. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I know he'd be very appreciative of that. And I know he spoke highly of you all the time too, Kev. That's the kind of thing that, like in sports, you're supposed to be tough and you're supposed to be bad and you're supposed to have locker room talk. And he, and I learned right away, and my parents raised me properly, respectfully, but, like, it's the same thing. We treat kids as humans. We won't call them out negatively, terribly, in public or in private, that kind of thing. We don't swear. People think that's, oh, come on. We treat them like respect because they're human beings. They're young kids. They're going to make mistakes. Do we get frustrated? Am I a poor sport to some degree and want to win it, but not at all costs,
Right.
not at the trophy case. It has to be accomplished by the right way. It can't be governed by how big the trophy case, it's the background of the whole package. And I think I'm most proud, and our coaching staff too, we instill that, is to help them in life. Hockey's going to be over sometime. I mean, I've had these conversations with the guys that, are in the NHL now, to the Jakes of the world, that, just about being a good person, be a good role model, the little kids are watching you, all those things. Play the game hard, play as tough as the rules, pick up when the whistle blows, you shut it down, you pick up the puck for the ref. When you're done with the game, you pick up yourself, you pick up your locker room, you take care, you say please and thank you, and hold the door for grandma, all those things. I mean, the kids laugh at me. They think it's cornyisms, they call it, even though that's not a word, I don't think. But, what's kind of funny is, in later in life, they'll come back and you'll be around them or see them somewhere and they're making those statements. They go, well, you might have been laughing, but at least you're listening. You remember the statement. So we try.
Well, where did it all start? We pride ourselves here on Wooden Sticks to going back to the old school days when it really was different equipment, different sticks, all that good stuff. How did you get drawn when you were a little kid to the game of hockey?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Highland, and there was a little playground called Homecroft, and there was a lot of good athletes there. I didn't know it at the time, but we'd skate at an outdoor rink. And, it was I lived probably about 6 blocks away, and your parents trusted you, and the world was safe. So you'd literally, it's an old story, probably, just like you guys have lived to a degree. You put your skates over your stick, remember, so they're easier to carry. Yep. And you'd cut up through the yards and the driveways and the alleys and go to the playground. And then you'd skate. And I was probably about 5 or 6, and my parents let me do that. Just had to be home at a certain time, and we'd have the rink guy, the guy that ran the rink, that flicked the lights when it was time to get ready to go home, because we didn't pay attention. We didn't have watches. We wanted to play all night if they didn't flick the lighs. So you'd play, and I'd come home, and my dad would say, "How'd it go?" And I go, "Well, I barely touched the puck." And he goes, "Well, you better get better." So I quit saying that stuff. But so at a young age, and then I'm the youngest boy in my family of 3. And they needed a goalie, so I'm like you, Kevin, an old goalie, but got put in the nets because they wanted somebody to shoot at, and I wasn't big enough to retaliate. So that's how it started. And then played youth and played at Cretan, that kind of stuff. So went on from there.
Who was the first NHL player that you, I'll say, fell in love with? Because I had a love affair with a couple of goalies as a little kid, including Gilles Malach, but also Tony Esposito. Was there a guy that you looked up to?
I liked the Montreal Canadiens, Ken Dryden, Cesar Maniago from the North Stars. I like watching them. They were kind of similar styles. And then I liked the Chicago Blackhawks. So I started watching Tony and Phil Esposito and those guys.
Yes.
And I remember, I'm going down memory lane, but when I was in high school, they had the 6 original teams, and they'd have games on Sunday afternoons. Oh. And I worked at a gas station on West 7th Street that a car would come through about every 2 hours. It was just a little dive gas station. But I'd sit and watch the games and watch those guys and watch Bobby Orr and, all those guys. It was so much fun to watch. But probably to answer your question, Ken Dryden, Cesar Maniago, Gump Worsley amazed me.
Yeah. No mask. I can't imagine playing the position with nothing on up top. That just, it blows me away. I'm just in awe of the whole thing.
Yeah. Now, I'll ask you, because you live it with the professional level every day. So I obviously then sticks for wood, and they were straight, all those things. But how did he never get tipped or screened? I know shots weren't as hard. But like you say, he never wore a mask. He didn't lose an eye. He didn't lose teeth that I know of. How does that happen?
It shocks me, because no matter what, pucks were still getting deflected. And because you're a goalie, you're going to spend part of the time on your back end or on your side or on your knees where you're down low. Yeah. And it really is. I marvel. It's funny. I get to travel with Tom Reed, and Tom loves telling old North Star stories.
Right.
With Gumper, he always just shakes his head, because, Gump would show up for games. Gump didn't like practice. He had all kinds of injuries and illnesses that crept up supposedly to keep him off the practice rink. And it was a different world back then, completely. Right. But you're right. You wonder how that was even possible. And then I look at the equipment now, and I know you every day you see it with your goaltenders at Hill, but I love the gear we wore because I could feel it, and I could I could feel the puck, and I could feel my gear. The stuff now it's way better, it's way lighter, but I wouldn't have a chance with that gear today.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? In 1983, when I was a young assistant with Coach Scry, and they won the state tournament that year, that undefeated 28-0.
I remember that team well.
A goalie named Mike Schweitz. His parents owned Schweitz's bar on Payne Avenue or whatever over on the east side. Yep. They didn't have, respectfully, they didn't have a pile of money. So, I was done being a goalie. So remember I think I had Cooper pads or Winwell or whatever they were, GM 12s, whoever made those. I gave them my equipment. So anyway, they win. Well, in Aldrich at the rink and up in the stands and in their locker room is the championship teams listed. So even this year, our goalies would go, "Coach, what was your equipment like?" I go, "Come here." So I went down to the 1983, the picture on the wall right at the end of the locker room, and they look at it and they go, "What?" I go, "That was my equipment. I gave them to that kid because he didn't have enough money to get equipment." And they started laughing.
No way! That's such a cool story.
Yeah, I go, "No, that was I go, the only bad part is, you guys have your lockers and you got fans going, and plus it handles the, where I'm going to say that. I go, I don't know what it weighed in the beginning, but it was always about 10 or 15 more pounds heavier by the end because it never dried out. Remember?
No.
It just got soggier.
And we lugged our gear kids today, honestly, and you make yourself sound old, but like there were no locker rooms at high school arenas.
No.
You brought your bag, you put your pads over your shoulder, you carried your sticks in, and off you went. Like it was just a normal thing, and it's just a different world now. And listen, the kids are still hockey players; they're still great. We just have different stories to tell, and I think it's so cool. I knew that team well because they ended up beating Burnsville in the championship game, and I was on the junior varsity at that time. I wasn't yet on the varsity, but I idolized Burnsville's goalie, who was Johnny Olson, and he had this incredible yellow mask. And it's funny, it was a different era, but those masks were such a big part of the flavor of the state tournament in those early 80s.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we had to make, I don't know if you remember, like I had to make my own mask out of fiberglass, and you'd make strips and you'd make a mold out of, and do all that. And it kind of looked like Friday the 13th, the guy. But yeah, that was pretty neat. And Gorgie, you came back a couple of years later and beat us very well. So I can remember those years too. So yeah.
Ironically, the same type of game. Like Hill Murray scored late to beat Burnsville in 83 in a 3-3 tie, and they win it 4-3. And then Bloom scored in 85 in the closing seconds to revert. And again, the cool thing is both those teams were right there at their peak form and just, ready to become, at least in the 80s, they were dynasties. And then I think they met every year for 4 or 5 straight years. And, I was so lucky because, Coach Kosicki and Coach Skrypak had such an influence on my young life. And without those two guys, I'd never end up loving the game of hockey as much as I have. And the game of hockey has given me everything. And I've been, it's funny, my daughters were asking the other day when the Wild season got over, what it's like. And I said, well, it's no different now than when I was a player. I mean, the week right after the hockey season ends is the saddest week on the calendar for me. And I'm like you. I don't have great coping skills when it comes to disappointment. And so I've been down in the dumps, even though I'm doing nothing. I'm not coaching, I'm not playing, but I'm there and I love the season. And so for, 52, 53 years now, I've had a hockey season, whether it's player, broadcaster, coach, you name it. And when it's over, it's a bummer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have had an outstanding career as a player and a coach, and now with the Wild. So you're amazing, kid. So I'm proud of you.
Well, I love connecting with you. I know we're going to be a part of that leadership seminar this summer. And I think we have a lot of people that listen to this show that have young people that play the game. And I love that the Wild give back in various different ways. But, the leadership summit to me is at the top of that list. And that's where all the different teams in the state are invited, boys and girls, high school hockey players, to have their captains attend. And because it's the Minnesota Wild putting it on, there are a lot of really cool people that come talk. I know Trent Tucker and Natalie Darwitz were a part of this last year, and I know you're going to be a part of it this summer. What a great opportunity for these kids.
It really is. And what I think is really interesting is, and I can speak just for like the captains that we have that we bring to that day to leadership, I'm thinking, are they listening? And we meet before and after, and obviously on things. But what I loved is things that they heard from all you guys and from the leadership, that the day at the Wild at the Excel, they were bringing into the locker room. And so, you hear a month later when our season's going and some of the communication, and it's like, that is really cool because, that day had an impact on those kids and on their lives, and they talk that. So, again, it sounds like a cornyism, but it's pretty neat that the value that they can get out of listening to other coaches or, the Wild or, Matt Maka or all the leadership and you guys. So it's pretty special. I think it has a great meaning, and the Wild's excellent at putting that together.
And I'll tie this right back to the Wild for kind of our final little mini segment here. I think this year was a little more disappointing when it was over than most for a couple of reasons. And I'll start with a fellow goalie, Marc-Andre Fleury, who's one of the all-time greats. And Bill, I think I mentioned this to you when we connected about midway through the season. This group of guys, this locker room that John Hines and his staff had in my 19 years covering the team was the most selfless team I had been around. And truthfully, this was a group that really did care a lot more about the person next to them. And I think it starts with Spurgeon and Foligno, but actually Marc-Andre Fleury, I think, a big part of that and the impact that he's had on Gustafson's career. You mentioned earlier that when you watch teams, you can kind of, put yourself in that position. But when you're a head coach and you've got a group of athletes that is selfless, that's got to make your job as a coaching staff and a head coach that much easier.
100%. And being respectful. But this past season, like I mentioned, we had 20 guys that, yes, the younger ones or the ones on the fourth line or the third set of D or the backup goalie. Yeah, they'd like more, but they just worked hard, kept their mouth shut, accepted it. They were really good. They were a family, no bull. And that doesn't happen every year. And I won't say the year lately, but, you fight through that. And that's a big part of the coaching too, is how to, help the coaches, or how do we get to where, you get the kids to buy in and be careful about the supper table. I call it the supper table, about trying to work with their parents and stuff like that. But, with the Wild, you could see it. And I want to give an attaboy to them. I mean, when Marc-Andre Fleur, how about when Gus, for the overtime of the one game, said, "You go"? That doesn't, professional athletes, they're out for their business and their paycheck to some degree, but not that group. It was unbelievable. And on a selfish statement, the one guy I would like to meet before I leave this earth is the Flower, because he seems like an amazing man. And that set the tone for the whole locker room, probably.
Well, and I think because of the impact he's had on so many players, it was really cool to hear him this past week here talk about his future plans and how he's going to be a part of the organization. Bill Guerin picked up on that, and in some way, shape, or form, he's going to have his fingertips on this team. And I think the impact he's had on Gustafson, but then I look at younger players like Brock Faber and Matt Boldy, and they've spoken openly about this guy's practice habits and the way he enjoys the game like a kid, and how it's important to do that. Because I think these kids, when they're really special players, and I'll use Boldy and Faber as the example because you've seen them play for a long time here, they get forced to be older than they are at a young age because they're asked to do so much. I look at Brock Faber, and he comes to the Wild and he's asked to go from being a college kid and a guy that was in the first row cheering on Kirill to being his teammate and being out there and being a man. You forget that you're playing a kid's game. And if you can see it through Marc-Andre Fleury's eyes just a little bit and treat it like it's just a game and have fun with it, you're going to be better at what you do. Exactly.
And how about the impact? How about the impact that he made on the Flower on all the teams? He's getting standing O's and everybody loves him. And my God, when you're talking, you're watching the game, and you're a big tough guy, Coach Lechner, is sitting there crying on the other side of the TV.
It happened to me in Montreal. I was so embarrassed. I was like tearing up. I'm like, I can't do this. I've got to talk to this guy at some point. But you live long enough, you see it all. But I had never seen that. I had never seen. He didn't play in Montreal. He didn't play for the Canadiens. He didn't win a cup there. He lived and he was from that area. But the respect they had for him, and then what we saw in Pittsburgh, and then teams sticking around. Alex Ovechkin, who was his longtime rival, these guys were arch enemies for almost 2 decades, and that's the kind of respect. Again, all deserved, because this guy is above and beyond most anybody I've ever seen at that level. But that tells you everything you need to know about Marc-Andre Fleury.
Yeah, and what a family man, and all the things that we talk about that are way important. So anybody that's listening, they've got to have balance of all that. It's so important.
Final segment here is the Hat Trick Hot Seat, and this is just fun stuff for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. And I think the first one's going to be the most fun for me because we're roughly the same age. So I got to know, Bill, your first concert you ever attended. I got to know the band that you went to see, and then the venue where that concert was, because this ought to be good.
Yeah, it's old-fashioned Lechner. Beach Boys at the State Fair.
Yes. Oh, I love it. And by the way, that had to be so much fun.
It was. I wasn't really a concert guy, not being weird, but, just playing sports and washing and waxing cars and just being a kid. I wasn't real big. I liked all kinds of music, but yeah, we went to the Beach Boys at the State Fair. And then I like country. So we've been to, Alan Jackson and Tim McGraw and all those guys at the State Fair. It's easy. You can get a snow cone and then go to the fair. I don't know if that counts as a concert though, really, but.
Oh, it counts for sure in my book. Okay. Your all-time favorite sports movie would be what?
Oh boy, there's a lot.
I figured.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I like a lot of those baseball ones.
Oh yeah, me too.
Name a couple of those, and I'll tell you if I'm in or not.
How about Kevin Costner in For the Love of the Game, which is one of those movies that I didn't think I would like, but I loved.
Yeah, I did love that. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned your dad, and so obviously when you think of the father-son sports thing, Field of Dreams comes to mind.
Field of Dreams is big. Yeah, I never have gone down to the field. Some of my friends have gone down there, and they have, I guess, like they have youth. They let them play on there for a game or two in the summer. So one of the kids I coached at Hill, he had his in hockey. He brought his kid down there and coached in baseball. That'd be pretty cool to see that. Have you ever been down there?
I have not.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Tony Rife, who played at Hill Murray, as you know, one of my
That's
college.
The one I'm telling you about. That's the
one of my college. I thought you might be. So Tony and I are still good friends and still connect, and he'll text during wild games. But I know he took his son's baseball team down there, and I got a bunch of pictures on my phone from that.
That was the one.
It looked like a.
And what's the one when the little boy in baseball when he took his dad's Babe Ruth baseball? Remember that? I love that.
Oh, God,
remember that baseball?
Yep, I can't think of the name of it, but it's.
I know that was one of those, but yeah, I don't
know.
So
many good baseball, and there's, again, if you look at any particular sport, you have your favorite. Miracle, obviously, for hockey, to me is as good as it gets. Now, I don't even know if you like seafood, but I know that you spend some time down in Florida when the hockey season wraps up, and I love seafood. So I'm going to ask you, and if you don't have an answer, that's cool. But do you have a favorite type of seafood when you're in Florida that you like to get fresh?
Gorgie, I could lie to you, but we're hamburger, good salads.
Yep.
Chicken sandwiches. So we go down into Tin City. You know where Tin City is? It's the side of Naples.
Oh yeah.
I like going down there. There's a little restaurant that you can sit right by the bay and watch the boats come in and out. And they got a great burger. We're very basic. To be honest, I've never had fish. Stu's laughing at me. And all the people are down here go, oh, you got to go to this restaurant and try that. And it's like, we're good. So if you put the most expensive meal of fish out in front of me and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'd have the peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
We are who we are. That's okay. I really do appreciate that you were honest about it, because as I asked the question, I'm thinking about all the different types of fish and the crab legs and the lobster, and you know what? If that's what you like, sitting on the bay there having a great meal, sounds like heaven to me anyway. So great way to close this out.
I'll go quick. A couple nights ago, we went to this place that was recommended by one of the car dealership guys, friend of mine. And we walk in there and we look at the menu and go, oh, no. It's all fish, all kinds. Finally, at the very bottom, you could get like a grilled cheese sandwich, a salad, or a burger. So I got a burger. We're good.
Can't go wrong with a burger, though. I'll never argue against a burger. So, hey, Bill, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I could do it for another 2 hours and it would be easy. Just love connecting with you and congrats on what's been. And you know how I feel about you, but just an unbelievable career. And, what you've done for Minnesota high school hockey at Hill Murray is to be celebrated. And I really do appreciate what you've done.
Well, thank you. And it takes a village. I got great coaching staff with me, and you got to have good players and good kids. But we try and do it the right way. We're not perfect, but we're learning all the time. So really appreciate you guys and all your support. So it means a lot to us, too.
Awesome stuff. That's Bill Lechner. I'll be back after a quick little break here to close the show here on Wooden Sticks. All right, fun conversation there with Coach Lechner. We crossed paths 40 years ago, and we've had a chance to coach against each other, be around the rink. I've broadcasted a bunch of his games, got to know Bill real well over the years. And just as you could tell, listening to some of the stuff that we got to hear from Coach, does it for the right reasons, does it the right way, and certainly does it at quite a high level. Just a fantastic human being and one of the great coaches in the history of high school hockey in Minnesota. It's not to be argued. Every single year when the playoffs come around, no matter what that roster looks like, and this year they were one of the best in the state in terms of their roster, but he gets the most out of every single team. Every year, they always show up when the lights are brightest, and I think a big part of that is the way that he and his staff handle those kids. They develop the human being, they develop the hockey player, and they put them in a position to succeed. So great to hear some of his hockey takes and the backstory and the goaltending aspect, which I, of course, love. And then the passion he, of course, has for the game of hockey as he still watches all these playoff games, which we all do night in and night out. Want to get your input on the show here? You can ping me on X and or Twitter, whatever you call it, but at Gorgomatic21. And if you know of anybody, whether it's a family member or a family friend that wants to get their business elevated and get their name out there, our guy is Andrew Height. He's as good as it gets. We call him the White Dog. All you got to do is send him an email, aheydt@talknorth.com. We'll watch some playoff hockey. We'll dive in here all weekend long, and then hopefully next week we'll connect again here on the show. Bring you some great guests. I've got a nice little list established. Bob Motzko on that list, Bill Guerin on that list. Anybody else you want to hear from, let us know, and we'll take you week by week here and talk hockey all year round on the Talk North podcast platform. My name is Kevin Gorg. Thank you once again for diving in to Wooden Sticks.